Hey everybody, it's been a while. I've been on the road working on elections to help Democrats win, and it's been a really great election. It's also the last time I'll be recording in this apartment. I'm about to move apartments, and this is going to be my last time recording here, and I'll miss this place a lot. But you'll see the background change, no big deal. I'll just keep recording content. So, yeah, back to the election. It was incredible. On election night, it seemed like it wasn't going to go so well, but the voting, as more and more votes are counted, usually in elections, not every vote is counted on election night. It takes a couple of weeks to count them all, and in close races, that can really matter. And the more votes that are counted, the more likely that it seems that they are to be Democrats, and I believe that's because the Democrats who make up the margin of victory for winning our races are less likely voters. They're less likely to turn out. Republicans traditionally are older, more regular voters, have established patterns, and that makes it very easy for their voters to turn out quickly and efficiently. Whereas for Democrats, it's always a scramble to get everybody out because so much of our coalition is made up of people who traditionally are less likely to vote. So there's a lot at stake here for the Democrats to make sure that they feel like that voters in the Democratic Party who voted for Democrats this cycle feel like the investment they made of their time in voting, when they usually don't actually vote that often, a lot of them, is worth it. So that, I think the pressure is on the Democrats right now to deliver, and that's a really exciting place to be. I love to be in that position of needing to deliver. And I hope that all other Democrats are with me in embracing that role because, now it's now or never, right? This is it. It's a really exciting time in politics. We're about to take on Trump directly for the first time, and so this transition that's happening between midterm and general and presidential election is going to be a really exciting one and a huge test of what the Democratic Party's modern coalition can do. And we'll find out. So, going back for a minute, I'm going to go back to the 2020 election, but going back to the analysis of the 2018 election for a moment, one big thing to note is that Trump's election strategy, which was effective, it was super effective, his personal appeal to the Republican base was immense, and I think it proves the power of using media, especially digital media, to and how powerful it is in this modern age. That he was able to basically saturate the eyeballs and ears of his most important supporters and get them out to vote in record numbers. So I'm not dinging his strategy at all. I think it was super great for him to do what he needed to do to not get made completely irrelevant after this election. But the other thing that's important to keep in mind is that the Trump strategy, while ginning up a lot of great turnout in rural and small town areas, is basically lost. It could be. I mean, we don't know yet, but it could have lost the GOP, the suburbs, forever. And that's important because until very recently, the suburbs weren't even competitive. They were longtime GOP strongholds, and it's a big change that now you have the cities and the suburbs sort of against the small town and rural areas. And for someone like Trump, who has given hope to a bunch of communities, especially old people in small communities who've been sort of screwed over by the economy because deregulation led to the absorbing of wealth into only a few, and economic activity, not just wealth, but economic activity into just a few a few metro areas. So it's like San Francisco, New York, Washington D.C., maybe Chicago. I mean, Chicago is even a regional city. It's just a few areas that are taking all of the economic activity right now. And I think that's what's at stake. Is a lot of these rural voters have been neglected for so long by their own representatives in the GOP that now Trump has given them hope and they're turning out in record numbers for him. But if that means that it's now the cities and the suburbs solidly blue, which is what happened in this last election, versus small town and rural, even at elevated voting levels, that's not really sustainable for the Republican Party over time. And so I think we'll have to see whether this holds, or whether the Democrats can successfully convince the suburban voters that they are a better steward of the public trust than Trump and his strategy. And I guess we're going to find out, right? This is going to be a big test for us. And if the pattern holds up that we saw in this last election, then Trump could win 2020 technically using the Electoral College while losing the popular vote by a huge margin and losing suburbs forever, possibly. Because if the pattern holds up and he is the defining figure in the Republican Party, and right as of right now, the opinions on Trump are probably not fully entrenched yet, but by the end of his re-election campaign, they will be forever. Like there will be people have fully formed ideas of Trump that will last a lifetime, and so if that lifetime opinion of Trump in the suburbs is that he was bad for America, then that's a huge problem for the GOP moving forward. We'll have to see how that goes. And I'll also add that Trump has not really done something totally new. What he's actually done is hasten already existing trends, right? That the suburbs used to be totally Republican, and they were trending competitive, right, from being safe GOP areas. And now, if they become safe Democratic areas, that is sort of the completion of a trend which everybody knew was going to happen at some point, or suspected might happen, projected might happen. But they just didn't think it would happen so quickly. And so it's interesting that Trump is sort of hastening. I like this actually as someone who is a younger person on the younger end of the spectrum. I'm not young anymore, but younger on the younger end of the spectrum. I'm impatient to see all these trends come to fruition. I'm impatient to see the older leadership relegated to retirement. I'm impatient to see my generation, and maybe some Gen Xers, but mostly to see the millennials take control of the country, because I think we're adults now and we know how things work a lot better than some of the older people in this modern world, and it's up to us for leadership. And seeing Trump hasten these and sort of reinforce the trends that came with Obama is in some ways worrying, because I care about Republican voters who live in rural areas, and I don't want to see them become the new ghettos of America. That would be really unfortunate. And so if I were them, I would be thinking really hard about whether they want to back this horse that that isolates them and accelerates and entrenches the positive elements of the Democratic coalition, and make sure that the battle lines are drawn for a full generation where progressive America finds it a tough time within the structural bounds of the republic, the Electoral College, the makeup of the Senate, that type of thing. Finds it tough to maintain power and undiluted, because the system is skewed so far to overrepresentation of rural Americans, but really that we're dominating the culture, and Trump is really making sure that we continue to dominate the culture in a lot of ways. So that's really interesting and exciting. So that's enough long-term sort of soliloquying here. Why don't we get to framing up where I think 2020 might go from here. So I think that Trump's chief challenge in a new divided government and over the next 2 years, no matter the circumstances, if the economy crashes, if the conflict breaks out, more trade wars, or possibly even military conflict, knock on wood that doesn't happen, no matter the circumstances, he has to look strong. And that's because his whole brand is built based on being a winner. And that's going to be super, super important for him to maintain the levels of support that he needs. It's not just that these rural voters agree with him. They also have been convinced that he's an effective winning leader, and therefore the Democrats need to do whatever they can to make him look weak. It's as simple as that, right? So for a president like Obama, to contrast, it wasn't part of his brand that he was always a winner, always strong. I think he was his brand was focused on doing what's right for America in his view, which is often not as effective. Like, it sort of made him seem wishy-washy sometimes, but it also meant that his support didn't drop out completely when he suffered a loss. He was able to maintain his support because that wasn't the core to his brand. The core to his brand was a new way forward with a new coalition of voters, and a more inclusive America, and pluralism. Basically, the idea that America is an idea and anyone can adopt that idea and become an American. And this backlash we see with Trump is a response to that, and a response to the victory of pluralism. And Trump has to seem like he's winning against an insurmountable war, right? I mean, it's really hard to fight against culture, the movement of culture in America, and he's doing his best to seem like he's strong, but it's a tough fight for him. And so he's got a number of cracks in the armor now that he's lost one of the houses of Congress, and he has a big challenge in maintaining his perception, the perception that his supporters have of him as a winner. So, unlike President Obama, just to sum up, unlike President Obama, for Trump, being seen as a loser could actually be fatal to him. Fatal meaning like not like he would be driven from office by this insider elite. Fatal meaning his voters would just stop turning up at some point. So I want to lay out some nuance here for the Democrats. I think it's important that we engage with Trump. It's not that we should be, just ignoring him or or obstructing for obstruction's sake, right? But it's really not that big a problem for Democrats politically to be obstructionists because our goal is to make Trump look weak, which is the weakness of his brand, that he says he's a winner. So if he says he's a winner, but everybody knows he's wrong, then he's done. So what I was thinking is that the Democrats, in order to avoid looking like stupid obstructionists and instead look like smart obstructionists, is to avoid the usual political speak, which you see. It's very easy for us to get sucked into. About the underlying issue or the principle or anything like that, and don't get involved in the nuance of the negotiation, but instead just focus their message on Trump's existential weakness. So, at every turn, my advice would be that Democrats in Congress should say that the fight is already over, right? They've muzzled him already. They've put a muzzle on the rabid dog that is Trump, and the fight is over. Trump already lost. And he's already a weak president. He's losing these fights with Congress. Yes, the Democrats are obstructing, but that's because Trump's a weak negotiator. He's not giving anything giving anything to the Democrats on the table. He's giving us nothing to work with. And why would we negotiate with somebody who has a weak hand and is whining because he's losing the negotiation? And if you make it about process and just say over and over that he's losing the negotiation, he's already lost, then it becomes the same self-fulfilling reality that Trump has created by saying he's a winner over and over again when all evidence to the contrary. He hasn't really done a whole lot. So the Democrats, interestingly, I think were up to this point sort of echoing Trump because it helped them create outrage that helped them win the 2018 elections, to say that he was doing a lot. Oh, look what he's doing here, look what he's doing there. So sort of everybody was in on it up to this point. I'm hopeful, I don't know that I can really say that it's going to happen, but I'm hopeful that the Democrats can realize at this point that it's not in their best interest to gin up outrage against Trump anymore. Instead, it's better to just say that he really hasn't, to tell the truth, which is that he hasn't been that effective a president so far. He really hasn't accomplished a whole lot compared to what Obama did, or George W. Bush did, or Clinton did, or Reagan. He hasn't done anything. He's made a bunch of splashy headlines, but he really hasn't accomplished a whole lot. So, the other thing is, and to wit, right, like when I say that he hasn't accomplished a lot, what I mean is that There's a very distinct pattern with Trump where he'll make a big announcement and get a lot of attention for it, but then the follow-up of actually executing on that is very low. And so I'm not actually worried about the big legacy of the Trump administration outside of the courts. The courts are actually a big deal. But I'm not worried about a big legacy of the Trump administration outside of the courts because they really haven't followed through on any of the promises. He says he's already done it or he's going to do it, and then no one ever follows up. This is a weakness in the news media. They never follow up to say, oh, well, he hasn't done it. So you might have heard that he's done a whole lot. Truthfully, once Trump presidency is over, whether he wins a re-election or not, there's fertile ground for the Democrats to do whatever they want moving forward. And so if we take if we assume that Trump continues in what he's been doing, which is to make a big splashy announcement that he's going to do something, but then not actually follow through, what we can do is just ignore everything that he says as irrelevant because it's never going to actually come to pass, and minimize the news coverage that he's able to get with announcements, because he goes for these quick announcements. If we minimize the news coverage, it's hard going against the bully pulpit, but it's something that should be done to minimize his bully pulpit as much as possible. And that's a really, really big challenge. I mean, the Democrats have historically been really bad at effectively communicating anything, and we are absolutely suckers for getting drawn into stupid fights that make us look like idiots. So it's not a foregone conclusion the Democrats are going to be able to capitalize on these incredible opportunities we have right now, but hope springs eternal that we can stay on message and deny Trump his bully pulpit. So that's where I am right now. I'm hopeful. I'm not confident that we'll be able to do that, but I am hopeful. And all we need to do, just going back to the baseline here, all we need to do in order to win is to convince Trump's supporters, though, although they agree with Trump's agenda, he is a poor general for their army, and he's already lost to the deep state or whoever else the right-wing psychos think is his enemy. Whatever enemies list they come up with that some conspiracy nutbags have, that he's fighting, whoever Trump's fighting against, according to them, we need to make sure that everybody knows that he's already lost to those enemies. So time to dump Trump the loser. And those are my thoughts on 2020. If anyone has any thoughts in response, I'd love to hear them. I am really excited to start doing these videos again post-election, now that I've got a little space between the election work I was doing, and really excited to be back. So thank you for watching, and feel free to subscribe and add a comment if you have anything to say. Thanks. Bye.